Here we go.
So welcome to the three-part series of Balanced Culture Consulting's Leadership Lunch Series. This first session is going to be on building trust and alignment. We're so glad you could make it. If you can make the next two, we hope you can. We're going to be covering strategies to prioritize time.
And that's on December 2nd. And that's going to build on what we've done today. What we talk about today is the foundation of an organization. Then we move on to how you move into strategies, prioritizing and focusing once you've gotten that basic foundation of trust and alignment.
And then in January, to start off the new year, we're going to give you our secret sauce to how to define behaviors that yield results. And so a few logistics. We've got, like as Priscilla was saying, we've got about 30 minutes of content from us, but we are going to actively engage you with some of the questions that you submitted when you registered throughout. So that could go longer, it could go shorter, depending on how engaged you are and how much chatting happens. And then we'll end with some open Q&As that you could ask not just us, but anyone on the call. If that's why we wanted you to share your information in the chat.
So as we're going along, keep putting stuff in the chat and I'll be monitoring that. And for those of you who just joined us, make sure you put your name and in the chat of who you are, where you are, and what you do.
And so I know some of you on the call, don't know all of you. So we don't want to assume that you know either or both of us. So we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves real quick. My name is, and we have some odd names. Priscilla's got the weird last name and I've got the weird first name. So we'll try to make sure you know it. I'm Alishka Padilla, and we've been business partners for about 1.5 years. Priscilla and I both have about 30 years of experience helping leaders build culture. We've learned what works, what doesn't work, and why. And we have grown to be so passionate about helping leaders create systemic approaches to sustaining results, creating sustaining systems to drive results. And so we're happy to bring this to you today. And I'll let Priscilla introduce herself.
So I'm Priscilla Pipo. And so Alishka and I met during COVID, actually. We were introduced by a mutual friend. Some of you know her, Alice Dendinger. And she introduced us because she recognized that we both were Myers-Briggs certified. We're both passionate about building culture and developing a program that we could bring to leaders. And it turns out we live 3 miles from each other. So the nice thing about during COVID, we recognized that the world was just so out of balance and there was such extremes. I mean, everybody was going through a trauma. And as we looked at that, we thought what people need is to get back into alignment and back into balance so that they can achieve the results that they need while focusing on getting everybody on the same page and keeping people considered. We also learned how to do it all on Zoom. So that's been a lot of fun.
And I was just going to add, I mean, we're so glad you're here today because, you know, as you know, we're probably preaching to the choir here. There's no better time to focus on this. It's so hard to get good people right now, and it's even harder to keep them. So we hope you'll learn some tips and tools and learn to be more intentional about building trust and alignment for that good foundation.
Absolutely. And during what, we'll get to that in a minute, actually, when we talk about turnover, because that's one of the big things that's happened at the end of COVID that has really affected. So as we go through.
Let's skip the obligatory photos and bios. Y'all can look at that later if you really want to.
So let's talk about building a balanced culture. So as we'll tell you at the end, that's the Facebook group that we've created, is building a balanced culture. But the reason why is because we recognize that when your organization is no longer hitting the marks or you're not getting the results that you're expecting, frequently, if you go back and you look at culture, if you take the time to see, you're bleeding energy off, because people are focused on the wrong things, or they're focused on infighting, or they're not communicating well. So we have a theory that there are 3 pillars that if you focus on these, that you're going to get the results seamlessly every time. The first one is strategic alignment, getting everybody going in the same direction. And that's when we focus on values and mission and purpose. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The second one is leadership focus. You want your leaders within the organization, from the C-suite down to the line managers, to be aligned in what's important and what to drive towards results. And the final is people systems. And that's sustaining a culture of trust and productivity by making sure you're rewarding what you want repeated and you're reinforcing when things are not being done appropriately. So let's go a little bit deeper on this. When you're connected with your why, and you're connected with your team, you will first you look at your strategic alignment. What's your why? You want people to be connected by more than just their work. When people were leaving in droves, what they call the Great Resignation, the research that was done about why people were leaving their jobs recently was because they were seeking meaning. They were seeking to be connected to something that was more important than themselves. And you think about it, the world was disrupted. And as the world was disrupted, people began to focus on, what do I really want out of life?
If I'm going to leave my home, it needs to matter.
That's right. I'm going to get out and drive all the way back in. So one of our favorite stories about alignment is the one about NASA. If you remember back in the 60s, when the big program for putting a man on the moon, and the story goes that JFK, John F. Kennedy, president, was visiting NASA, and as he was walking through the halls getting a tour, he saw somebody over in the corner sweeping up. And he walked up to him and he said, "Hi, I'm Jack Kennedy. What are you doing?" And the man looked at him and said, "Well, Mr. President, I'm putting a man on the moon."
Yeah, still get chills with that. Yeah.
Isn't that a powerful story? And that's because it's talking about people having a real sense of purpose and passion in what they're doing to accomplish great things.
The next step is leadership. And this is important because your leaders need to be in agreement on all the organizational drivers, and they need to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing and that they're intentional and modeling the way.
So we see when leaders are leading by example, not only are they demonstrating, but they're rewarding and reinforcing. And we'll talk more about that because that's how people know what they need to be done. You increase engagement, clarity, and when you give them the tools they need, you almost guarantee success. People generally do what they think is expected of them. So that's when it falls back on leadership. And then when you get to the bottom line, the results are what matter. And when you have all of these lined up, we know that the people are walking the walk, they're being reinforced for it. You understand at the end of the day, you're going to get things done.
As one of the leaders we work with said, how can I not focus on culture when I see the kind of results I'm getting?
Absolutely. The leaders that get it understand there's no substitute for getting everybody on the same page. So let's talk a little bit about trust and turnover. And trust and turnover. When we said a minute ago about the Great Resignation, about people leaving because they didn't have a sense of where they belonged. Well, one thing we like to talk about is the turnover tax. And we encourage our organizations we work with to think about what your turnover tax is. Your turnover tax is when the amount of time you're spending on recruiting, on training, on getting people on board, only to have them leave. You look at your turnover rate and you can see that you can lose money pretty quickly if you're not careful. So there are some steps that we need to take in order to get there. The first one is be aware of first impressions. People need to feel connected when they first arrive. People need to decide whether they're going to stay or whether they're going to go. First impressions when people come on board. We used to say it was about 3 days. But really, it's about 3 hours. Within that first period of time, you need to engage them so that they feel like they know that they belong. They know what's expected of them. Think of it as speed dating. You make a first impression on somebody. Do you hand them a box and say, go set up your own computer? Or do you work with them in a way that helps them understand where they fit and what you expect of them? You want them to engage right away. You also understand that there's a honeymoon period. We consider that to be about 90 days. Used to be it was 6 months, then it was about 90 days. Now we're seeing the honeymoon period is really about 30 days. Everything's quicker, everything's shorter. And so you want to make sure within that period of time, they know what's expected of them, why they're there. So if you look at the statistics and the studies that have been done, a recent Gallup poll showed that turnover rates can be reduced if you focus on onboarding. And we call that awesome onboarding, but because it creates a foundation that without that foundation, people won't know why they're there, but when they have it, they're going to get it. And it's going to make it easier for them to trust what's expected of them and deliver what's expected of them. So let's do it by the numbers. We got about 30 days of the honeymoon period to really connect after your first impression or your speed dating of 3 hours when they show up. make sure that they're connected immediately. You can increase your retention by up to 50%. And job satisfaction, 70%. When you're doing a consistent job of bringing people in and onboarding them in a way that aligns them with the culture, with the values, and with the expectations of the organization. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you want to move in then to understanding, what do you cover with them in their onboarding? How do you help them connect? Well, first of all, you have to understand your non-negotiables. Not only yours within your division, but the organization-wide. Everybody needs to have. So for example, an organizational-wide one might be, we never talk down or berate employees or customers. We always speak respectfully. That would be an organization-wide. A division-wide one might be, you're always on time. We get at our desks at 8 o'clock. But another division may be over research and development, and time isn't as important, but outcomes. So understand what those non-negotiables are within the division. And the second thing is communicating expectations. You want people to understand what's expected of this. And we teach this in our basic entry-level management position training so that they know this is one of the easiest keys to success. Make sure that when somebody comes in that they have been given not only the job description, but a list of expectations and how you expect them to be successful. People generally do what's rewarded, A, and B, what's expected. Once they know what's expected, they're going to do their best to do it.
The really fun part is reinforce and redirect. And this is where you spend time looking for when people are doing things right. You don't try to be the gotcha girl or the gotcha guy and catch people doing things wrong. Obviously, you are going to find them do things wrong occasionally. And then, of course, you're going to redirect them. But you really want to be actively looking for opportunities to reinforce when people are doing things right. And you would actually state, I appreciated what you did the other day. You did exactly what we expect. And we find essential here at this company. Thank you for doing that behavior, and tell them why that's so important. That is so important. And you can redirect in the same way. What you did is not consistent with our non-negotiables. My expectation is this, and next time I need you to do something more like that.
So think about it, it's accountability. Mm-hmm. And that's what people really want. And we've seen that's time and again when we engage with staff members. They want to hear that everybody's being held accountable so that their good performance is being recognized and everybody is being held to the same standard.
That's right. And so equip your team for success, give them the tools they need to do and what they need to do, when they need to do it. And you do that by having this consistent dialogue and feedback loop with your teams.
Make sure that you make time to not only give them what you know that they need, but ask them, is this what you need? Are you getting what you need in order to be successful? It's very important to allow that space where they feel that they can ask when you set that time aside. And the outcome really is creating trust, creating something that they can rely on so that there's consistency. And that gives you not only alignment and trust, but takes you into the ability to repeat over and over the success that you're experiencing. So Hannah, Hannah Stromseth, one of the questions the question that you submitted was about setting clear expectations. And when somebody's not setting expectations clearly, that they're having different expectations about how something should be done. You gave us the example of if a manager doesn't make it clear about a time frame, they assume that it's not being followed and they assume that you're not giving the right level of care. Do you think that going through this type of protocol would be helpful for that?
I think so. Yeah.
Good.
It's always hard because, we have so many different clients. And so the manager I was talking about, he, we just don't touch base on that specific client enough. And I think that clear communication would be better for sure.
So yeah, coming down to communicating frequently, but also setting aside those one-on-one times where you have a chance to sit down and maybe we'll give you a few more tools in a little bit about having those direct conversations that can make sure that you're getting that clarity in a two-way street.
Yeah.
Now, Jessica, I know you can only chat, so you can respond by chat. But Jessica Gray, you brought up a situation that you'd had at a previous place of employment where you had a recruiter that had kind of overstepped her bounds, and it ended up being a career limiting decision. And so one of the things we wondered is, would having a culture of the organization communicating those non-negotiables, constantly reinforcing and redirecting, have helped this particular employee have more success?
Yes, it would have. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I wasn't expecting you to answer.
Okay, awesome. Oh, no problem. I'm in a room where I only have 2 students, so I'm able to communicate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great to be here, by the way. So hello to everyone.
Hey.
But yeah, to answer your question, in that particular organization, it would have been great if the culture supported open communication, open dialogue, an opportunity to express to employees that it's not good there needs to be a hierarchy, so to speak, and to respect that chain of command. When there's a glitch in the culture, I find that it can be rectified if you start from the top down. But if leadership is not recognizing the problems, or even if they don't want to acknowledge the issues that are at hand, that can pose a problem.
So you're saying it needs.
I'm sorry, you broke up. I couldn't hear that last remark.
You need to start with leadership.
Absolutely. In my experience, the last organization that I was working for, the leadership needed training on how to be leaders, so to speak. So when you have those sort of issues at hand and you don't have enough people involved that can support what leadership needs, and I'm talking about from executive level directors who've never been, this may have been their first time in leadership positions. They may or may not have known how to deal with certain situations. So you had a lot of backbiting, gossip, a lot of negativity within the organization itself that really spoiled the culture.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
When I say from the top down, what I mean is your leadership at the top has to recognize what's going on.
Time to move.
Sorry about that.
So I think that if you're able to stick around, we're going to be addressing some tips and tools in the next section that might help a little bit with that.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely.